Welcome to the PR Essentials Summit series, where the experts reveal how to do PR so that you can do it yourself. Hi, and welcome to Auditing Your Social Media with Danielle Foley. Thank you so much for joining us. Did you know that social media is part of the PR mix, or at least we like to consider that it is? It's a critical part of customer acquisition and communication today. So that's why I think it's very important to factor in your social media when developing your strategic PR plan. As it relates to earned versus paid relationships, as you know, there's influencer marketing, there's content creation, there's customer education. So all those things kind of play into what we're doing with social media, marketing, and public relations. Often the content comes from your social media posts, and it can also be leveraged for PR. So PR pitches, things like that, stories. So today I'm speaking with Danielle Foley, principal of Foley Marketing Advisors. She has more than 20 years of experience developing and implementing a wide range of successful marketing, public relations, and social media strategies. Welcome, Danielle, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to going through this with you.
Yes, I'm very excited because I think it's very important for us to be sharing this side of the topic as well. And how important it is for especially startups to be building their social presence. It's almost like, building your Google SEO. I think it's kind of the same thing almost. And how important it is for them to build their communication strategies, what channels they should be going to, where they should be reaching their target audience. So this is going to be a really helpful and useful conversation for many of our startups. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to jump into the questions because I have a lot of them here, and hopefully we can do that. So first things first, I think it's very important to talk about that not every channel is right for every brand. And I've seen people make this mistake. And one of the credos that I know that some people tell me is that, go with what sounds and feels good to you. Do the channel that feels good to you and for your audience. But how do you select which social media as a company, as a business? How do you select which social media channels that are right for you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you definitely have to do a little bit of research. The first thing you're going to need to know is who is your target audience. So you need to kind of define that and determine, are you targeting consumers or businesses? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's a few things you need to know about each of the major social channels. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about a few of the big ones. So the majority of active users on Facebook are female between the ages of 25 and 65. And Facebook primarily is best if you're targeting consumers, because that's really where they are. For Instagram, it's almost split down the middle between male and female users, and the majority of folks there tend to skew younger than Facebook, around 13, as low as 13, up to around 40 years old. Again, that we're talking about the majority. So Instagram's best if your targets are consumers mostly, but you can probably reach small business owners as well, because they're going to be the ones who are most likely managing their own account. So you can reach them that way. Twitter has slightly more male users ranging in age from 30 to 65. And the kind of posts that go on at Twitter are usually news, information, or commentary versus focusing on heavy visuals like Facebook and Instagram. And while you can use Twitter for reaching both consumers and businesses, it's a more effective strategy to use when you're trying to engage with individuals or, again, small business owners. Okay. And last but not least, LinkedIn. LinkedIn should absolutely be used if your targets are businesses. So the age range there is roughly 26 to 60. And it definitely seems like anyone who's in business at this point has an account on LinkedIn.
Right.
And of course, LinkedIn has Sales Navigator, which is their app, very powerful app that can specifically help to generate you some good quality leads.
Yeah, no, that's a great breakdown. I think I think it's really important for people to realize that these channels all have different purposes. And so a lot of times, everyone thinks they have to be on everything. I know for me, for our business is like we really focus on Instagram and LinkedIn, obviously. But I do have that Facebook account where I don't do anything. And we actually have a client. They have a Facebook account, and the other day they're like, well, why do we have a Facebook account? I was like, I didn't set up your Facebook account. I'm not sure. But they don't have anything posted on there. And what they do have posted was from like 2014 or something like that. So it's really old content there. They don't even use it. It's almost like, I don't know, it's kind of almost worse that they have old content sitting there,
right?
Because they don't use that channel. So I know I was actually talking in a different conversation earlier about a company that I know. They don't use this channel, but they just set it up so it looks really nice. So they set up their like image a static image that they wanted there, and they just kind of like left it there. But it looks good.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, if you're going to have the channel be on, quote unquote, you definitely should populate it with content. There's no question about it. Because it'll just generate too many questions from people like, what's going on? Are they there? Are they not there? And it's easy enough to, especially if you're using a scheduling platform like Hootsuite, to just go ahead and schedule your content to Facebook as well, if you're going to have a Facebook account.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. So once you've determined the channels, you've decided, okay, my target audience lives on Instagram or whatever. What are the basics of creating your voice? Because I think that's really important, is like establishing a solid voice. We do the same thing when we're messaging for PR, of like creating this messaging that can convey a voice that we want to be streamlined across all platforms. So what are the goals and the best practices there?
Sure. So, I mean, just to kind of do an overview of brand voice, it's very similar to like saying your brand's personality. And through social media, of course, you're conveying that personality through the messaging and the images that you're going to use. So the easiest way to kind of illustrate this is just through examples. So if you're a business that provides high-level training to C-level professionals, then you're going to want to keep your messaging and your visuals pretty buttoned up and professional. But if you're a consumer goods company that sells funny gag gifts, for example, your messaging and your visuals are going to be silly, comical, and lighthearted.
Sure.
And the only thing to keep in mind other than that is be consistent across all of your social channels. So, if you're funny on one, be funny on the other.
Okay.
That's it.
And is that like goes along with the also design, right? Like be consistent with design too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's one thing that a lot of companies forget, is that the look and feel should be kind of similar and congruent to each other, so that when you go there, it's almost like, you're almost like visiting their website, because it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, really clean. I mean, that's what it is. All of these places are a version of that website. Yeah. Okay. So I think, obviously, one of the huge things that we're talking about here today is PR. And I think it's important for people to understand how PR and social media overlap, how they can work together, how they can support each other. What are your thoughts on how social media messaging should be overlapping with your PR program? And, maybe some ways that we could keep that lined up.
Yeah, sure. So, it's funny, a lot of companies, they'll receive publicity and that'll be it. Like, oh, great, we received publicity. Well, it's not enough just to receive it. You have to promote that you've received it.
Right.
And, one of the best ways to do that is through your social media channels. And you'll want to create posts that speak to, obviously, the publicity that you received, where you received it from. And you're definitely going to want to mention or hashtag the outlet that you received it from in the post. And then also you're going to use the the URL of where that publicity is found online. So if you include the bit of publicity on your website, that's fine. Then you can direct people back to your website on the landing page with that publicity. But if not, if it's in, the New York Times, you just put the URL directly to where it can be found. And
I always find that it's like really funny, like people do the worst job of this. Like you've paid so much for your PR program, or you've worked so hard to get this piece, and you're like, okay, great, we got it. Now what do we do with it?
Yeah, they're so excited that they got it that they're like, okay, we're done. We got it, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you definitely have to promote that. And it's also, in terms of social media, it's a great opportunity to grow your followers on your social channels by doing this. And it even offers a great opportunity if you want to advertise. So, you're not going to advertise everything on social media, but you definitely want to advertise something like publicity that you got.
Sure.
And so that will attract new followers because they're like, oh my God, these people got great publicity. They must be super important. Let me follow them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Using it for advertising is great. Also, like maybe even like newsletters, right? To include it in maybe your newsletter and say, hey, we just won this award, or
Absolutely.
hey, did you see us in Wired? For some of these people, this audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just blast it out everywhere.
Yeah. We always recommend after we do a big like PR product launch or push, we usually like try to collect the all the logos and make sure they put it on their site, like as seen in. But you could also post that on Instagram.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's a really important thought process. Also, obviously sharing on Twitter, because, from a PR media relations perspective, it also shows a little bit of like the respect that you have for the people that are writing for you or about you. Obviously, when you or your PR person are pitching an article, you're requesting someone to validate what you're doing. And I think we forget the relationship that you're building a lot. Well, I don't, because I do this every day. We don't. I think for someone who's just coming into PR, you're not realizing that everyone's doing a job, and every piece of the job really affects what they do next. So this happened to us quite a bit in crowdfunding, where, this was maybe back in like 2016, but like, where we were working with campaigns and people would support them. And then I'd go back maybe in the next campaign and someone would be like, well, we don't cover crowdfunding campaigns anymore because we're sticking our neck out and these crowdfunding campaigns aren't delivering. And not the ones that we were working with, but other ones weren't delivering. So it kind of like ruins it for everybody.
Yeah.
So it definitely takes a toll on their reputation as a media person. But on the flip side, on the positive side, on the point of Danielle, what she's saying, that when you do get something great and you're able to cross promote, it helps them as well. It helps the writer and the journalist. So it shows that there's like a mutual respect that, okay, I'm sharing, they're sharing, we're all doing our part in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So just reinforcing the relationship that you have with the outlets and the editors and whoever else, is huge.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to reach out to them, let them know also ahead of time that you are going to be publicizing, or promoting rather, the publicist. Oh, never mind. Scratch that. Take that part out. Okay. We're good.
Okay. Well, okay. So what are some of the basics, best practices? So we've talked about a lot of them, I think, right now, but what are the basics? This is like really someone who's getting started, who wants to have a really nice social media presence. What are the basics of developing their strategy and kind of coming up with a plan?
Yeah. Well, without getting too much into details, because I can go on forever about this stuff.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly simplistic in that once you've determined who your target audience is and which platforms they're actively on, I highly advise my clients, or I do it for them, to review and analyze at least 2 leaders and 2 direct competitors in their industry. So you really, I mean, you're going to create a spreadsheet and you're going to capture as much information about, again, the two leaders in the industry and your two direct competitors in the industry. Break down everything. And then you're going to want to see how you can differentiate just a bit so that you're unique, but you're still on par with them in terms of what they're doing. And sure, you may not be able to afford some of the elaborate videos that some of the big guys have. There's always going to be some cost-effective tactics that you can employ to help you be perceived on the same level. And, when you're looking at your direct competition and what they're doing on social media, that's when it's really important to make sure that whatever you're doing is better than what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of translated in terms of posting more frequently than them or engaging more with your followers, advertising, and then in general, just having better post visuals or adding more video content to your post, things like that.
Well, I'm going to ask you a quick offbeat question. Yeah. Hopefully I don't throw you off, but what about, you were mentioning frequency a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I had this question in here, but I think it's a good question that everyone kind of has. Like, how often should people be posting?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's some like basic numbers, but then that's also when I say, look to see what your competitors are doing.
Right. Okay.
So if they're posting 3 times a week, then shoot for 4 times a week, or at least 3 times a week. So if your competitor is only posting once a week, then you might be okay with 2. That's fine. So that's why that's important. I recommend if somebody's just starting out, 2 to 3 as a minimum. Yeah, 2 to 3 times a week.
Is it better to post more? So let's say I'm like, I want to go all the way. Should I be posting every day? Is that?
No, definitely not. Only if you have really engaging, interesting content to post.
Okay.
So you don't want to post just anything. I mean, because you'll irritate people, quite honestly. Yeah. You'll come up in their feed constantly and they'll be like, what is this garbage? And they may unfollow you.
Okay.
So it's super important to have quality content that's well thought out, that's you've strategized over and developed a calendar in advance for.
Another off the mark question.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking about this as you were saying this. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a calendar. And I know some people who will just schedule a week or 2 weeks. And I know some people who will schedule a month. Is there like a best practice of like how far you should be scheduling out so that you could stay relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I usually try to tell clients 2 weeks, 2 weeks out. There is some content, like if you go past the 2 weeks, it's fine. If you have what's considered evergreen content, particular landing pages on your website that you happen to be promoting on a routine kind of basis, that you can stagger out as far as you want, quite honestly. But if you're posting more about timely news events, or of course, if you have a webinar or something like that, then it has to be within that 2-week window, really.
Okay, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we're getting a lot down to the crux of it. So I love this. What is the best way? So you were talking about differentiating your brand from your competitors. What is the best way to do that? And what types of content? I feel like one of the things that I see quite a bit, there's so much, especially I always think about Instagram first, but there's like stories, there's videos, there's podcasts, there's images, there's all this stuff. Like what kinds of content should I be promoting? Let's say I'm like I guess I'm going to throw something out there. Let's say I'm like a drone company and I make consumer drones and I want people to buy them for Christmas or whatever the case is. Like, what is the most kind of effective way for me to be posting content? What types, like formats, should I be?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, video is definitely king. So wherever possible, I mean, all the social platforms, their algorithms love video.
Okay.
So the more that you can do that, the better. And then stories. So stories are definitely key now to incorporate, um, possibly once or twice a week, if at all possible.
Yeah,
Um,
I kind of thought of stories before as like something very temporary, but I'm hearing like there's more searchability in stories. People are watching them a little bit more because they're like kind of watching it like the way they would watch TV.
yeah, absolutely. And kind of what's been going on with something like Instagram stories is that people are looking to their stories first. So they're
Okay.
looking to see what's new and fresh. Like there's almost a psychology behind it, right? Like FOMO, if you will. So, oh my God, this is the new thing in the stories. What's going on? I have to know what's happening, So
Yeah.
there's that kind of psychology behind the stories. Also, what I do for some of my clients is I will post their content as a story, and then the following day, prior to the 24 hours, I'll highlight it, and that will save it in Instagram. So if you know in the profile, those circles there, yeah. So those are highlights, and they're kind of buckets or categories that you can keep and save certain content for. So one client, I do a featured client of theirs once a week. So I have a highlight reel that's called featured clients. And so each week after it's in the story, I will move it there where it will live on forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There's just so many little
Mhm.
nuances to this.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So video is basically what you're saying is video is king.
Yeah.
Um, and then stories is good.
Mhm.
Anything else that like any kind of like little tricks maybe that should be known in this
Yeah.
part in this
Yeah, sure.
part?
So, I mean, I went over the fact that the post should either inform, educate, or entertain. Those are kind of the three guidelines to follow.
Okay.
And there's a general rule of thumb for posting content. And it's basically for every 10 posts, 8 of them should be those three: inform, educate, or entertain. And then only 2 should be promotional in
Okay.
nature. So that's something super important to keep in mind. Again, you don't want to turn anybody off. You want to keep your followers engaged, and you want to be perceived as kind of a thought leader in your industry or whatever it is that you're promoting. So that's kind of why you do that. And then, in terms of posting consistently, you always want to make sure that for your visuals, wherever possible, post or have your logo layered on top of the visual, either upper right, left, or lower left, right. You want to maintain a consistent color palette throughout social media. Again, we're talking the visuals. Your bio across all your channels should be the same, identical. Your social handle. So that is a little difficult sometimes to get exact across all channels.
A huge problem I've had so many times. So many times we've changed it just to have the same one across, all of them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's tricky, but you should try to make it as similar as you can. Yeah. And then obviously we went over brand voice, how important that is to keep that consistent as well.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of differentiating yourself is super important within the content of your posts. So it's, keeping an eye on your competitors and seeing what kind of stuff are they posting, and making sure if they're getting a lot of engagement, you're understanding why they're getting that engagement, and you're able to somewhat emulate that in your own posts.
Yeah. I mean, how often do you recommend like kind of checking in with your strategy?
Having to what?
Checking in with your strategy. Cause I feel like sometimes people just want to like set it up and go and like just go on autopilot. And I feel like with social media, you really can't do that because things change so
Everything
often.
changes. Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a good, like, is it quarterly? Is it monthly? I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
monthly,
no, I mean, I
monthly
would
is a
say
lot.
quarterly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say quarterly is best case scenario. I think that's kind of hard for a lot of people, but that's ideal.
Yeah.
If not quarterly, twice a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing all the social media work. Obviously, this is really just touching on the surface of it, but how should we be measuring social media and based on the kind of brands you are? So this is like, I guess, two different questions. It's like a B2C brand might measure social media one way, and a B2B might measure social media another way. But overall, what are the measurements I should be looking at that are going to move the needle for me?
Yeah. So, I mean, even it's not necessarily which industry or which targets you're going for. It's really what are your goals for your social media strategy.
Okay.
So that's kind of all part of it. That's the bigger picture. And there's, in general, you can on a quarterly basis, again, hopefully you're monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting your social media efforts. Um, and you can do that by looking at each of the social channels metrics. You'll be able to see that. Or if you're using a scheduling platform like Hootsuite, you can use their analytics tool, which is super easy.
Mhm.
But in general, there's 5 important metrics that you should be measuring. And again, you want to make sure you're getting the best ROI for your social media program, and that you're on track to reaching whatever goals you set out for. So the first metric is brand awareness. And that can be seen through the number of mentions, shares, links, and impressions that you get. And all that you're able to see pretty clearly. The
Mhm.
second is your audience growth rate. So that's just the speed at which your brand's following increases. Then there's post.
What's a good growth rate?
Oh, good question. Well, that's tricky because there's a lot of variables in there.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
you've got which channel is it on? You've got what's your industry? You've got who's your target? How many times are you posting? So it's tough, and I'm not going to put a number on it. Happy to do a little investigating for anybody who wants to know.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, because it's really all over the place.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. So social share of voice, that's the fourth metrics. And that is how many people are mentioning your brand on social media compared to your competitors.
Okay.
Yeah. And there are actually apps that you can get that measure that for you, not just on social media, but online. And you're probably familiar with that for PR.
Well, so yeah, some of them I think cross over, some of them don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Different. Yep. And the last metric, but probably most important, is the conversion rate. So this is where visitors who, after clicking on a link in your post, take action on a page. So, like, subscribe to your newsletter, download a piece of content, register for a webinar, whatever.
Mhm.
You have to have, I forget what it's called, but something on your website that enables you to track that conversion rate.
Okay.
That's super important.
Okay. Oh, like a pixel.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Sorry. We're here to support each other.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, and I'm gonna I promise I'm gonna make this one of the last questions I have. But you had mentioned tools, and I think you'd mentioned Hootsuite a couple of times. So for the people who don't know what these like scheduling tools are, can you just give a quick, and I can fill in here like on maybe some, because we definitely use some as well. On some of the like basic tools that you could find to help you schedule and post, and then maybe even measure some of the stuff.
Yeah. So Hootsuite is the one that's super popular. They have a free version, which I think allows you to connect 3 social channels,
Okay.
which is great. It's a little bit limited, but for the most part, you can do the basics, and that's great. And within that, you can do analytics as well. There is another one, Agora Pulse, which I actually use for a different client. And it works the same way as Hootsuite. So they're both really great platforms for scheduling. You can engage. So you connect all of your social channels there. And again, you can engage directly through their platform, which is key. You can create lists within the platforms.
Okay.
So, you can break down the niches that you're targeting, your competitors, you can see that and what's going on their feeds. And it's a super important tool. It's kind of all encompassing for social media.
Yeah. I remember, I think I was using Hootsuite a while ago. This is a long time ago, but that's what we would do. We would have our channel up, and then we would have maybe one or two of our top competitors next to it so that we could just see what's popping up on each one of them. And it just helped us kind of gauge what we should be talking about when, or maybe we missed something and we should jump on the bandwagon or something like that. But
yeah, definitely.
it's nice to see them next to each other, and you don't have to be the owner. I think for Hootsuite, you're not able to post on their account, but you can monitor what's being said.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then also we've used Buffer quite a bit. And then for Instagram, because that's tricky. And I think you can post now. Can you post on Instagram from Hootsuite?
You can. Yeah. Just not stories.
Oh, okay. Okay. So later, later is really designed for Instagram. I know we use that a lot for Instagram specifically. If you're a heavy Instagram company, then that might be a good option for you, because it does give you a lot of dynamic little tricks that you could do for Instagram. But it's designed specifically for that format because of that particular size and the look of how Instagram is. So later is a really good one as well. So we had mentioned Hootsuite, Agora Pulse, right? Buffer, later. And then do you ever use Social Mention to kind of look at brand voice, like how a share of voice for social?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. Yep.
So Social Mention is another one. And you can I think on Social Mention, you can look up hashtags and find like trending hashtags and things that are popular. Right. I think actually, and I don't know if I'm going to put you on the spot too much about this. I had a hashtag conversation with someone the other day, and obviously you want to put hashtags on your posts to increase searchability. But one thing that we were talking about was having a hashtag that's too common.
Yeah.
And how that's not necessarily a good thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's different nuances about developing your hashtags. It shouldn't be too long. There's like a sweet spot of how many characters it should be.
Okay.
You definitely want to do some research and figure out how much comes up, basically, for the hashtag that you're considering. So for me, marketing strategy, for example, something like that, or social media strategy, I do use those because it's really hard to come up with super unique
marketing stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've done like small business marketing, social media, okay, that's a little bit better. So if it makes sense, and if you're able to really be specific with your hashtags, that's great. And of course, you also always want to have your own branded hashtag, which hopefully is unique.
Right. Yeah. I think I guess for us, for services, social media, PR. I mean, those are going to be like the main ones that we always use. You kind of just want to be in the stream of that consciousness. But one of the conversations we're having is, like you said, if you could be more unique, you rank higher in the posts when people search that hashtag. So if you're able to have a more like fine-tuned hashtag, but that's still used, it's like you said, a very special sweet spot of the being used and also being unique, but you also want to rank on the top of that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're a small or even a medium-sized business, sometimes a good tactic to use is geography.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people, if you're a PR firm located in Atlanta, hashtag Atlanta PR firm or just Atlanta PR, stuff like that can be beneficial because that's how people search if they're looking for, that type of service.
Oh, that's true. And maybe like even like smaller businesses, maybe like coffee shops or services.
Yep.
That totally makes sense. And I
Absolutely.
think you kind of brought up something that, I think is really interesting. We use this for PR as well. But what would you Google? I think is like, maybe I should coin that phrase. But like you said, like, how are people going to search for you? And I think obviously that comes up in digital marketing, SEO, all kinds of different conversations. But that's another good way of coming up with your hashtag, I feel like, too.
Yeah.
Searching, like if you were searching for something, what would you search for? Kind of like that.
Yeah.
And we say the same thing for subject lines. Like I always tell people, like, if you're not going to open your own email, nobody will.
Right.
So, sometimes I just send myself an email to see if the headline or the subject line kind of stands out a little bit.
Yeah,
definitely. But I think, again, same thing goes with hashtags. And I feel like also same thing goes with some of these posts, like the content of the post. Right. If you're bored reading it, likelihood of other people being bored is pretty high.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people don't realize the amount of work and effort that goes into social media and what you do. Thank you so much for sharing this information. I think it's very important for people to take social media seriously and do it well.
Yeah.
You can always post things, but if it doesn't have like a purpose or a function for your business, then you're really just wasting time, I feel like. So if you're going to have a social media strategy, do a good job. A good job. Follow these best practices. Danielle, if someone needs to find you, how could they find you?
Yeah, well, you can check out my website at FoleyMarketingAdvisors.com. You can certainly send me an email at dfoley@FoleyMarketingAdvisors.com. It's a little long, sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. Easy to remember. And then also we'll have that note somewhere in these like notes for this panel. And we'll send along your information, Danielle, to everyone so that maybe they could follow you. Are you on Twitter?
I am. Yep. I mean, the best I do all the social media channels for the most part.
Of course.
So yeah, you can always reach me that way as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for watching this panel. I hope you got a lot of information. I know it's just a starting point, but social media conversations can go on forever. So I want to make sure that you guys get to the other panels. And then we'll also have a downloadable worksheet here on some of the tools that we talked about, going through just some of the tools that you might want to use or have access to. So take a look at the downloadable. So you have access to that and you can kind of compare and contrast what different tools are and what you might want to use for yourself. I highly recommend a scheduling tool because while it seems you're like, oh, I'm just going to pop into Instagram. Instagram is like the most dangerous rabbit hole. I feel like you go in there to post one thing and then you're there for like 30 minutes. So a scheduling tool is always nice to have. Thank you again, Danielle. This has been awesome, very informative. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in the next panel.
Thank you so much.